happen.
Are we still the strongest military in the world?
We are. I believe we are, but we won't be forever. And if we keep up at this pace, we won't be for long, because the current operations in Iraq are running our military into the ground. It's an unsustainable pace. And I think what's most important for people to realize right now is that we can either have a superpower or we can have an all-volunteer army. We can't have both. Because right now there aren't enough people signing up, recruiting numbers are down, retention numbers are starting to show signs of weakness, so people are getting out, captains, sergeants are leaving the military, our equipment is shot, and we continue to send people back to Iraq for a third and fourth tour. And because Iraq has become such a suck on our resources, we've now had to move people out of places like Korea and put them into Iraq, out of training areas in the United States into Iraq. National Guard and Reserve units that should be here at home are now in Iraq. So I would argue in many ways, not only is our military being run into the ground, but our back door strategically is wide open. So I think one of my biggest criticisms of the president right now is that he's leaving us vulnerable. The Iraq war has made us less safe. And ultimately, we're going to experience kind of a Vietnam hangover on the American military. It's going to take a long time to repair the damage that's been done to our military as a result of this war.
I think we're going to have a whole generation or several thousand young men and women coming back from this thing, you know, three, four deployments with some real problems readjusting. It might become one of America's greatest efforts is cleaning up after this, just at home, dealing with when everyone comes home.
Yeah. I think you're right. There's a huge hidden cost to this war. Yeah. And not everybody who comes home loses a limb or suffers a brain injury, but nobody comes home unchanged. And I think what people really don't grasp is the scope. 1.8 million people have been through Iraq and Afghanistan since 9/11. And we talk a lot about the troops on the ground and the recent surge that the president has offered as a plan to try to quell the violence. So we don't talk about the surge of people coming home. And 1 in 3 veterans coming home are going to experience post-traumatic stress disorder. The divorce rate is climbing. We've got homeless Iraq and Afghanistan vets in America right now. And we've got a VA system, which is going to be their first stop, that is grossly underfunded and has been totally neglected under the Bush administration. And as we talk about all the ways that George Bush screwed up the war in Iraq, we're only starting to see the ways he screwed up the back end. And we're a country right now that's busy watching what's going on with Britney Spears or Anna Nicole Smith, and people just aren't tracking about what's happening regarding veterans. There is a cost to war. And I think you're exactly right, Henry. Over time, we're going to see that cost of war is going to start to emerge in our local communities everywhere around the country.
Yeah. Do you think there is at all a concerted effort to not exactly suppress information, but to only show certain aspects of the war, in that Americans are not allowed to see some available footage that would be very jarring and very telling about our conflict in Iraq?
Yeah, I think that part of it is they don't really want to offend people. I mean, I saw a lot of horrible things that I wouldn't want anybody else to see, but I think that the American people can't make informed decisions if they don't really get the reality. And when they get the video game version, it's a lot easier to send people over to fight and die and not see what it's really like, to really understand the gravity of the situation. So yeah, I think that the media is really shorting the American public in that respect.
Paul? Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that there is definitely a concerted effort on the part of the media to self-censor. I think that there are a lot of newspapers and television stations that feel that showing a dead American soldier is going to undermine the war effort, that they may get attacked on their patriotism. It may affect their advertising dollars. Budweiser may not want to sponsor CNN anymore if they show a Marine getting his leg blown off. So I think they have an absolute obligation to show the true reality, the carnage of war. But ask yourself when the last time you saw a dead American was. Have you ever seen a dead American in American media? Probably not. I don't know of any examples of when they've actually shown American troops dead in the mainstream media. The international media has done a much better job and a much more objective job of covering the media. But I think that there has been a consistent, concerted effort to shield the American public from the true American costs of this war, and it's been to our detriment, without a doubt.
And just seeing the Australian footage of something, or when you go, even watching BBC World News, like this austere reportage, you're like, whoa, are we talking about the same conflict? Yeah. Jason, what do you think the impact would be if, here are two very articulate guys, you and Paul telling the truth of what you know. What if there was like 10,000 of you guys speaking up, even like locally at Knights of Columbus halls or a sports bar on a Saturday night or a university? Do you think that could impact how the general public feels and knows about this conflict?
Yes, I think it would, and I think it would remove this connection between the war and the troops that still exists for a lot of people, where you can't support the troops without supporting the war. And I think if people would see more veterans coming out and speaking out that, hey, you know, I went over there and I really don't think I helped anything, then they would see that you don't have to mindlessly advocate for a war just because troops are actually going to go and sent to it. And if you really want to protect the country, at some point you gotta realize that it's in our best interest to get out. That's why we need to bring the troops home now, really, is because the war is making America less safe. It's hurting us in many more ways than it could ever possibly help.
Paul?
When you get home from Iraq or Afghanistan, your service has just started. You have an obligation to help your fellow veterans, to educate people, even if it's just sitting down in a bar and talking about what you think Americans should know, or writing a book, or talking with your buddies, or taking care of a buddy who might have gone through a divorce. I mean, we have an obligation as veterans, as Americans, to try to correct the course that is off right now. And I think that I'm inspired every day by these guys and girls who come home and continue a different kind of fight, no matter what it is. And you can't oppose the policy without opposing the people. And I think guys like us, you know, have an obligation to stand up and explain that to people. Because you're anti-war does not mean you're anti-troop. And we got to push back when the administration tries to reconnect the two and say you can't support Joe Snuffy in Baghdad if you don't support my surge in Baghdad. That's just ridiculous, and I would argue it's really dangerous. And it's one of the more insidious things that the Bush administration and President Bush have done over and over again, is to connect those two in a very dangerous way.
Well, I'm so glad both of you guys have the backbone to stand up and say this stuff. It might be the most patriotic thing you'll ever do. You know, stand up in the face of this and say what you all are saying. I can't thank you enough for doing it. Jason Lemieux, Paul Rieckhoff, your courage, your honesty, your bravery, the fact that you came down here today to talk all about it, I cannot thank you enough. A nation thanks you. This crew thanks you.
Sir, thank you for having me on.
Sure.
Thank you, brother.
Sir.
Appreciate it, man.
All right.